name is not Charlene Herod. My name is Justin Richards. I'm the pastor of Tias Baptist Church, and I think the easiest way to explain it is I am the bus driver this morning. Just real briefly, I bring you greeting and welcome from a lot of folks, and just say thank you right off the bat for everybody that is here. Miss Charlene was going to do our introduction this morning, our welcome, and she can't talk. So we're filling in for her, and I appreciate her willingness to help us out. And a couple of things real quick just to get started. One, we're going to initially adjust our schedule. We got a phone call about a half an hour ago from Miss Perdue, and she has taken a wrong turn. Thank you, GPS. So I will just get it started, share some information with you about why we're here this morning, and just give you some information. One of the first things I want to do is, if you've already noticed, there are a lot of us walking around with golden shirts on. The folks that you see in these golden shirts are our foster parents here in Carroll County, and some of our directors and caseworkers. So if you run across a question over the course of the next few hours, and you want to talk to these folks, I know that they're all available to share with you their stories, and explain to you the process of foster care and adoption. So make sure you check out those resources, because they're going to have the personal stories and they can explain those to you. Also, in your program, you should have received a card, and those cards are for questions for our panelists. If you've already looked at the program, or if you found out information about this morning, we're going to have a panel that's going to be comprised of and made up of a DFACS caseworker. So if you have questions for DFACS, and you want those answered in public forum, write those questions down. We will also have a young man that was adopted, so he's going to share his story. We're also going to have Ms. Perdue who's going to sit on our panel, and we have a foster family that has served since 2007 at Beams. They're going to also sit on our panel. So if you have questions that you would like them to ask in this environment, by all means write those down. And Bill and Laura, where are you guys? All right, Laura, if you'll stand up, she's one of my ushers, and Bill has disappeared. Bill's a dude that's built like me, but a little taller with a blue shirt on. If you will get those questions to them when we take our break, we'll make sure that those get put into the hands of our panelists, and the person that can best answer the question will try to address those questions for you. So we are just so glad that you come out. Obviously, I'll just tell you my story real quick as we get kind of into this morning. But I sat at a conference, a leadership conference, a little over 5 years ago, and a person stood up talking about foster care and adoption and made this statement. They said, if one family in every 3 churches in America would adopt, there would be no more orphans in the United States. So I sat there and I did the math real quick, and I said, well, 1 in 3, well, I could be the 1. And so came back and started talking to Jill, and Jill said that would be wonderful for us to get into that process of foster care and adoption. And so we contacted Carroll County DFACS and said, look, we've got friends that have adopted overseas, we've got friends that have adopted here in the United States. We want to start the process. And so hopefully in a few minutes when we go to our break, there are going to be some folks that are next door in the fellowship hall that can answer a lot of those questions for you. And so if you have those kind of questions like we did, go and ask Carroll County DFACS and some of our agencies about that opportunity that they can give you to become involved in foster care and adoption. So we started the process going, okay, 1 out of 3, we can figure that out. And so we started the process, and after a long time, to be totally honest with you, we thought we'd go and pick up a kid. And that's not how the process works. We had to go through the process of having our homes evaluated and filling out a lot of paperwork. But after we went through that process, we started what was called foster to adopt. And so there's 3 designations that DFACS has. You can go straight as an adopted parent. Say DFACS, if there's somebody that needs adopted, we want to do that. We took the route of foster to adopt. We knew when we went in that the children that were placed in our home potentially could go back to their families, and that's all right. We were part of that process, and we knew that. But the Lord intervened, and we adopted Caleb, and I'll share a little bit more about his story in a few minutes. But then some of you have the gift of foster care, and I'm going to steal all the Beams thunder. In 7 years, they've had 40 kids plus come through their home. So that's also part of this process that some of our care providers, one of our neighbors, the Gaines, are foster parents, and they had a little sibling group that was in their home for just a couple of days. We had an emergency situation a couple of weeks ago where they had a newborn baby that needed a place to stay, and the little man stayed with us for 2 days. So those are the kind of things, there are all levels of involvement that we need here in our community. And so we're just excited about what this does. Today, I hope in Carroll County opens the conversation, and West Georgia and East Alabama opens the conversation for foster care and adoption. But we are truly blessed today, and I'll tell this story, and then I'm going to invite my wife if she'll come up and introduce our speaker this morning. When we started this conversation, we were standing at Mayfest, and I was standing at the DFACS booth representing the DFACS and trying to get people involved. And I was talking with Tisha. I said, you know, in Carroll County, we just came out of, we had been here in November for the Homeless Summit. And it was so exciting to see people in our community come out and say, hey, there's a need for helping the homeless in our community. For almost 10 years, we've sat in this building for the Meth Summit and watched it grow over the years. And I looked at Letitia and I said, why don't we have a foster care and adoption summit? There are people in Carroll County that need to know what's going on for foster care and adoption. And she said, okay, get on that. And I said, well, who do we get to come and speak? And she said, you know, I think the perfect person to come and speak at our summit would be Miss Mary Perdue. And I went, really? Why? Proving my ignorance. But then we started looking at her story and what she did for foster care and adoption in the state of Georgia while her and her husband were in office. And that's when the bells and the whistles went off in my head, and I went, okay, she is the person that we need to come to speak to us in Carroll County. So I'm going to ask my wife, Jill, to come up and introduce our speaker, Ms. Mary Perdue.
During her tenure as First Lady of Georgia, Mrs. Perdue initiated an intense campaign for Georgia's children in foster care. She reached out to corporate, civic, and faith-based organizations where she masterfully designed a tapestry of support. Without a doubt, she will enlighten us today in such a way that we will leave this place with a greater sense of responsibility to serve the children of our own community. In our brief communication, I have personally witnessed her gentle spirit and her compassion. Mrs. Perdue, thank you for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Mary Perdue.
Good morning. I am delighted to be here today. And I know Jill is happy that I finally got here. I don't think there's a good way to come from where I live here, and I certainly didn't want to go up through the Atlanta mess this morning, so I just rolled in. But I'm so happy to be here. Now, this region in West Georgia, this foster care region encompasses about 11 counties. And I kind of like to get a sense of who's here today, if you don't mind. So if you're from Carroll County, would you raise your hand? Okay, a lot from Carroll County, that's great. And I won't call every county. But if you're from Troup County, anybody here from Troup? Anybody from Meriwether? How about Heard? Good, thank you. And Butts County? Okay. Lamar? Pike? Did I do anybody else? Did I hear somebody? Harrison County, okay. So I wasn't going to call every county, but maybe I should. And this is a big area. Upson, Fayette, Coweta, lots of counties in this area. But first of all, thank you for coming. This is such an important issue. And as Jill mentioned, while Sonny was governor, foster care was my primary focus. In fact, I took it as my job. I basically spent every day, at least from 9 to 5, and many times out around the state, trying to talk to people about foster care, because you see, foster care is one of those issues that had a huge black cloud hanging over it. A lot of misinformation, and certainly I would say also a lot of ignorance about what foster care is, why we have it, what goes on, who are foster parents, who are foster kids, who are these caseworkers, and what are they actually doing with children. And there was a lot of questions about it, and I came to realize that this is the reason why that black cloud existed, and to some degree still exists today, although I am hopeful that we are beginning to remove it. And it is because most of what people know about foster care, they know when they read about it in the paper. And what makes news in the paper? We all know what makes that news is when we have a failure in the system, we have a tragedy, we have a child usually abused, or even worse, perhaps a child who dies while in care. That is not acceptable. That is not something that we can just shrug and say, it's okay. It's foster care. But when Sonny went into office, it was very evident that foster care had become a big black hole that just collected children, and from there, those children might get out, they might not get out, they might go back to their families, they might be in and out of foster care several times, but nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody knew what to do. Certainly the system was overwhelmed. The workers were overwhelmed, doing their best to help children, because that's what foster care should be about, doing the very best for kids in need. 20,000 children were in the system when Sonny went into office in 2003. 20,000 children in Georgia. And I just said, how can that be? I know we have 159 counties, but 20,000 children in a state with less than 10 million in population just seemed beyond my belief. And I said, there've got to be some ways to get those foster care workers some help, to get our system to a good place. And I began to look around. Well, you know, the budget was always an issue, and certainly the First Lady does not have a budget at her disposal. So my main focus became volunteerism around the state, and we worked very hard to get people involved with foster care who have never been in foster care before, people that you might not think would have anything to do with foster care. Corporations like Home Depot, banks would help in group homes, or would pair up with people to make sure that people who were caring for foster care, for foster children, foster parents, our group homes, that they had the things they needed to provide the very best for the children. And that was the goal. And by the time we left office, the number of kids in care was right around 8,000. For a lot of reasons, we were able to bring that number down. First of all, we stopped yanking kids out of the home at the first drop of a hat and tried to figure out what those families needed to be successful. How can we help this family stay together instead of, oh, let's rush in and pull these kids out. They may not be in a good place. And you know, no matter why that child has been removed from their home, they want to go back. They want to be with mom and daddy. And I have found that even in the face of some of the most painful abuses, children want to be with their families. So our job as a state system should be to try to reunite families in a way where those families can be healthy again. So what we tried to do was bring support around those families. Do they need a job? Do they need a house? Do they need money to pay bills? Is there an addiction problem? Is there a housing issue? What is going on with this family that is causing them not to be able to have a healthy environment to raise their children? Now, every one of you here knows that our society is plagued by some pretty bad things that just go on all around us. Things like drug addictions, the meth epidemic, and there are just many, many, many things that I could bring to your mind certainly the breakup of the nuclear family. So many families out there with no dad in the home, or mom and dad are split, and mom's trying to do it all, or dad's trying to do it all on their own. You know, we have become a society where we don't have the resources of family that we used to have years ago. We're a very mobile society. It used to be that when a young mom got ready to have her baby, she had a mom nearby. She had an aunt nearby. She might have her sisters nearby. And when that baby was crying unconsolably and mama didn't know what to do, she had someone to call on. Someone who had walked that journey of a newborn before. And we don't have that today. We have young women giving birth and they feel like they're all alone. And many times they are on their own. So that is part of the problem, and that is part of the reason that children come into care, because their families are not safe for them anymore. You should know that the vast majority of children come into care not because of abuse, which we tend to think about always, a physical, a sexual, an emotional, a psychological abuse, but probably 80% or more come into care because of neglect. Now, what is neglect? Neglect is a mom or a dad who doesn't know what to do with this child. Because I guarantee you the vast majority of parents want to do what their children need. They want to do what's right for their kids. And they're trying. They just don't have the resources. I saw our job as a state to try to help those families get the resources they needed to be able to keep their kids at home. And we did that. We brought a lot of kids home. We slowed down the removal of children from the home and tried to figure out what was causing the problems. And certainly if there became a situation where the child was unsafe, that child was removed from the home. Our uppermost thought must be, what is best for the child? What is best for this child? Foster care comes about because there are situations where children are not safe in their homes. We all know that. I wish so much that we could see a day where every family was healthy, where every child was nourished in their home, where every marriage was strong, but we aren't there. Somehow I don't think we're going to get there in this world, in this life. I want to tell you just a little bit about my experience and how I came to see foster care as sort of a mission for me while Sonny was governor. In 1998, we have 4 children, and in 1998, our youngest was a junior in high school, and I was beginning to look at my nest and say my nest is going to be empty soon. And I'm one of these people. I was a stay-at-home mom for 19 years, and then went and decided I should use that degree I earned way back in the dark ages. I went into the public school system as a speech pathologist and worked about 5 years in the public school system, but still felt that my calling was to be in my home. And I'm one of these people that I never wanted anybody to come clean for me. I know that's really weird. I never wanted anybody to do my housework for me. I liked to do those things for myself. I want you to know it was a real struggle when we moved to the governor's mansion. And I was told that when I got up, I should not make my bed. What? I should not make my bed because that was her job. Her job was to make the bed, you see, because we had someone to do all of those things that I so enjoyed doing for my own family. But, therefore, I had to do something while Sonny was governor that would occupy my time. So in 1998, as the nest was getting empty, I ran into someone who said to me that she was fostering an infant, a newborn baby who was going to be adopted by a Christian couple, a 2-parent Christian couple who had been waiting for a baby. And the bells just went off. And I went home to Sonny and I said, I'm going to look into this. I knew about the organization through which this lady was fostering the infants. I had been familiar with it and knew the woman who was the director of its Covenant Care based in Macon. And I knew her and had known her for a long time, but I really didn't know that much about it. Sonny looked at me like I was crazy. He kind of said, you really want a newborn in the house that you're going to have to get up with at night, you're going to have to get fixed bottles, and you're going to have to do this and this and this, and you know it's going to tie you down. And I said, yes. I said, I can do this. Newborn time is my very favorite time. Some people don't like them until they're 3 months old, 6 months old, until they can talk to you, until they're walking. Not me. I love that newborn time. It just doesn't last very long, you know? So we became foster parents in 1998 for newborns awaiting adoption. It was the most precious thing, I think, that we've just about ever done with our family and our 4 kids. And I will say this, all of our children were able to have time with our foster babies, and I have a much better scrapbook for the foster babies than I was able to do for any of my own children as they were little. But those children, I know, we did what we could do for them. We treated them like our own. We loved on them. You know, we fed them, we napped them, we diapered them, and then we put them into the loving arms of 2 Christian parents who had been waiting for the blessing of a baby in their home. People would say to me, how can you give them up after you've been loving on them like that? I said, because I know that that's God's plan for that baby's life and for that family's life, that that baby was meant to go into the loving arms of this Christian family. And I know they will be raised and nurtured in the admonition of the Lord, and I know that they will grow up in a home that loves them, and they will be provided for, cared for, and those parents will do the very best, I said, and that's how I could give them up. We fostered about 8 little newborns, and then my daughter informed me that she was expecting twins. And I knew, because she worked 3 or 4 days a week at that time, that I wanted to be the caretaker for these little twins. And so I said, I need to take a break from fostering. I'm sorry, but I can't foster anymore. Once the twins turned 2, I decided I could manage a little infant in the house, and we had 1 or 2 more little infants to come into our home. And then my husband decided that he would run for governor. That was never in the plans, by the way. That was one of those things where he got too close and just people pushed him in. So that was my initial experience with foster care. And from that, I think God gave me a heart for foster care and for the foster system. And particularly when Sonny became governor, for trying to see what I could do, if anything, to help our system become better. You know, government was never meant to be a family. Government does not do this job. It's not supposed to be something that government has taken over. But we, people, particularly, I believe, the people of faith, the people in church, the people who believe what the Bible says, I believe that we have turned our back on what is our moral obligation, and certainly a mandate, to care for those orphans in their time of need. And I took every opportunity as First Lady to go to speak anywhere who would have me speak. I spoke at corporations, I spoke at lunch and learns, I spoke at civic groups, I spoke everywhere, and I spoke at church groups. And when I spoke at church groups, I said, do you realize in the South, in Georgia, we have a church on every corner, particularly down where I live, which everybody calls South Georgia, but we who live there call it Middle Georgia. Thank you very much. Near Perry. There could literally be a church on every corner of every intersection. Now, you do the math. If we have that many churches in Georgia, that many congregations, why is it that we have children who can't find a place to sleep at night? Why is it that we don't have enough foster families to care for our children who are in trouble in their own homes? That's when I tied in this black cloud theory that I have. And I said, I know why. Because people do not know what they need to know about foster care to become involved. And my job became spreading the word, telling people, here's what you can do to get involved. You can do this, you can do this. You can provide school supplies. You can write a thank you note to your caseworkers at the DFAC's office. You can take them cookies at Valentine's Day. You can plan a birthday party for foster kids in your county. All kinds of things you can do. And yes, you can become a foster parent. You can. But I'm telling you that we don't want everybody to be a foster parent. Everybody doesn't need to be a foster parent. But foster parents do need to be supported. They need to have people around them that they can call upon if they have a funeral to go to, or if they have to run out of town unexpectedly. They need to have people who will support them and who will help them in this mission, because fostering is still not a very accepted thing to do in our society. I hate that, but it is true. Sometimes people look at you like you must have an ulterior motive. I got very weary of hearing people say that foster parents did it for the money. Do you know how much the state gives a foster parent? It wouldn't be enough to buy their meals for the day, let alone to clothe them, to take them to the dentist and the doctor, to make sure they have the school supplies they need and everything else. And once they get into high school, believe me, it is a huge, huge difference for that child. It separates them even more from their peers because they don't have the resources to go to the prom, to buy the dress, to rent the tuxedo, to do all of those things that typical teenagers do. So anyway, that's my experience as a foster mom. When I went to the governor's mansion, people said to me, "Are you going to foster while you're in the governor's mansion?" And I said, "No. This is my time to see what I can do for all of the foster kids in Georgia, not just for the few that I could foster." And I do believe that that was my calling to do that. We've talked a little bit about why we need foster care. We've talked a little bit about what foster care is. A temporary situation. A temporary situation with our ultimate outcome being reuniting that child with their family in a healthy way, with that family having what it needs to take care of that child. And I can tell you, the where of foster care is everywhere. Foster care is everywhere. It's in every county in Georgia. It's in every state in our nation. It is all over the world. On the times when Sonny was able to travel internationally and I was able to go with him, one of the things that I liked to do was to talk to the state agencies which handle their child welfare. And believe me, they do it very differently all over the world. Some situations, I just stood back in awe and said, "Oh, we would never do that in the States." And some situations, they handled fairly similarly to what we do in the States. But the necessity for children to be kept safe sometimes outside of their nuclear family is worldwide. We are not unique in that. I don't think I found any place in the world who does it better than we do it, and yet we have so far to go in order to do it the very best way we can. And what we need is involvement. We need involvement from all kinds of people all over. We need people who never considered fostering before to think about it in a very real way. Jill Richards sent me some statistics about this area, and I want to share just a few of them with you because they might just